Hello, I'm at Liverpool today, where the EPC is organising a conference on terrorism and community cohesion. And during the next few minutes, I'm going to introduce to you a number of the speakers who were involved in the conference today, and to hear some of their thoughts about some of the most challenging issues the country faces today. Well, joining us now is Chief Superintendent Richard Woods. Richard, you were the Greenwich Borough Commander at the time of the Lee Rigby shooting. And I was very interested in the way you took people today through the detail of this major incident. And in particular, you addressed the question of communications.
Yeah.
You said at one point that you thought the media and social media were way ahead of the police in terms of the way that they were seeing and reporting this incident. What do you mean by that?
I think we're living in a very fast-moving world, and when I was down at the scene, the media are already aware of what's going on. I don't know what they're aware of or what they're reporting, but it's almost instant now. They get there as quickly as we do. Sky News and a lot of the satellite news channels are reporting things as they happen, so where historically we've had time to be able to unravel the sequence of events, now it is immediate, and you don't get a lot of time to prepare for it.
So does it affect, to any degree at all, your operational decision-making? Presumably not, if you're not aware what they're saying.
I don't think it necessarily affects your operational decision-making. I think it's just something to be aware of in the background. And of course, the media reporting might lead to other issues. So in the case you're talking about, there's certainly widespread community disharmony because of some of the reports going out. So I think it's something to be aware of, and something that if you're aware of, you can then deal with.
Do you think we could do more to improve our intelligence gathering from social media?
Yes, I do, and that's not a criticism of people who do that now. I just think people in my generation weren't brought up with social media, whereas the younger generation now they are. It's second nature to them. People, I'd say, putting things out as they happen. So I think people of my generation perhaps need to raise their knowledge and skills and awareness around it. But I think organisationally we could possibly make more use of social media.
And what about the tone of voice of social media? You had some comments to make this morning about how the police deliver their messages to the community. And there seemed to be a mismatch between the kind of language that you see on social media, here on the media generally, and the language used by the police.
Yeah.
Would it be more appropriate for the police perhaps to adapt their tone of voice in order to achieve more effective community relations?
Yeah, I think it's a balance. I think the public would expect a certain formality from us. We don't want to be talking about LOL and some of the abbreviations that people use. But I think certainly we could be a lot more human in the use of our language and say things as we know them. And I think organisationally, and I'm as guilty as anybody, we're still talking our own language, proceeding in an orderly direction, in an automated vehicle, people smelling intoxicating liquor. I think just talk normally, for me, is a message. But there is a balance, because I think people do expect a degree of formality, because we're the people who are sending them very strong messages out to communities.
So it's a question of tempering your language, adapting it.
I think so, yeah. So formal, but tell it as it is, in a manner that people can understand and relate to.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, another speaker at the conference today was Detective Chief Superintendent Scott Wilson, who's the National Co-ordinator for Protect and Prepare. And one of the things that struck me about what you had to say today, Scott, was in terms of dealing with communities, the theme of this conference, you seem to be extending your workload. You've been talking to many more people over the last couple of years.
Yeah, we realise that this is an evolving threat, and we realise that we need to involve business, we need to involve communities, and we need to involve overseas aspects as well, because people travel overseas. We've seen what happened in Tunisia in June of 2015. So what we have to do is protect British interests both in the UK and overseas. And the only way we can do that is by giving what I see the public the knowledge of what they should and shouldn't do if they're caught up in an attack, and what business can do to make sure their plans are in place to be able to deal with an attack in their workplace.
But this requires you to be more open than the counter-terrorism community has been in the past?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're realising we need the eyes and ears of the public, and that's what Griffin's all about. Project Griffin was all about empowering security guards in the communities, but what we're trying to do is empower the community. We're trying to say to the community, we want you to provide us with information if you're suspicious of anything, but at the same time we'll give you information of what you should and shouldn't do if you were caught up in one of these attacks yourself.
And what about the concern that you might be alarming people unnecessarily?
I think we see it in the news all the time. If we look where we are, social media, 24-hour news, it's on the news all the time. These incidents are happening near enough on a daily basis somewhere in the world. So it's pointless trying to hide it from the public. The public are aware it is out there, and what we're trying to do is give them as much knowledge as possible.
So when you go and talk to somebody in the tourism industry, what's the response you get back? Are they keen to work with you?
Well, the tourist industry is through Upton, through the travel companies, because of what they've seen happen in Tunisia and the downturn in tourism in Tunisia. They don't want that to happen in other tourist resorts. So they want to work with us to make sure that protective security element in those countries is heightened, and working with the police forces in their country to make them more responsive. So yeah, the travel companies and Abt as a whole are really keen to work with us.
So you're sending some of your team abroad now to work with British tourist interests in North Africa,
Yep.
And parts of the Middle East. What's the response of the local security services there when you turn up?
Well, some countries are better than others, to be honest with you. If you take the situation Tunisia is in, Tunisia wants their tourism industry turned round, so they're really keen to take on board any of the packages we provide to them, both to the police service and to the tourist industry. Other countries are a little bit more hesitant to actually take on board. But we're going there to say, we've got a large UK footprint in your country and we want to work with you to make you more responsive. So it's a mixed bag, really, depending on what the country is. But we work in 7 countries now full-time, where I've got coordinators living and working in those countries full-time.
And finally, language, not the language they speak, but the language of counter-terrorism. Is that something that is widely understood? Doesn't matter whether you're working in Tunisia or in London, there is a kind of common lexicon.
Yeah, I think there is, and what we start with a lot of these training packages is looking at what we presented here today. It's looking at the threat and presenting the threat is happening all over the world. I think I gave some statistics at the conference today talking about 300,000 people have been seriously injured or killed as a result of terrorism in 10 years. When we look at ISIL, 25,000 fighters from 110 countries. It is a worldwide problem. And I think in a lot of these countries they realise that, and what they're doing is they're taking on board the information we're providing them.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, we're now joined by Professor John Preston from the University of East London School of Education and Communities. John is an academic who's worked extensively with the Emergency Planning College and was taking part in this conference today on terrorism and its impact on communities. John, communities don't all behave in the same way. They don't respond in the same way to terrorism, do they?
That's right, Nigel. Communities have very unique responses to terrorist attacks. We can't always know in advance exactly how communities are going to react. They're going to react in their own way. But what we've discovered through our project is there's really 3 ways in which communities will react. The first way we call navigation, and if you think of that like a ship navigating obstacles in a river or in the sea, that means making changes to their behaviour, very slight changes. And you can see this in things like the Paris attack. So the community responded, there was an attack, the community had a response, another wave of attacks, the community responded in a different way. So that's kind of just navigating things as they happen. That can happen in a very fast changing situation. If the community has got a lot more time to organise, so if we take the 7/7 attacks, it was just one wave of attacks, so there was attacks on the tube, attacks on the buses, and then London had to respond as a whole. And you really saw people coming together. You saw supermarkets giving out water, you saw people helping out people on the tube, you saw companies helping afterwards, and you saw a big kind of wave of sympathy after that. So that's kind of organisation. Then you've got this really strange way in which communities behave, which is called reframing. And that's when the government or emergency services aren't really there. Now, we haven't really seen that in a terrorist attack yet. We've seen people like the EDL turn up after things like the murder of Lee Rigby, that terrorist attack. But we've seen it in terms of natural disasters. So when there was Hurricane Sandy in the United States, a group split off of Occupy, called Occupy Sandy, and started giving relief, first aid, medication, food to people in the outer boroughs. And because they were an anarchist organisation, they had their own political views that went with them. Now, we might see that sort of thing happening in terrorist attacks, the groups providing aid, but also having a political motivation for doing so. So let's say there was a terrorist attack in London and the EDL started giving help and resources to certain communities, maybe white working class communities in London, in Dagenham, Barking, those sort of areas. What would be the response of the authorities then? It's very hard to know what the authorities' response should be. Should they stop them giving that type of aid? Or should they support them? Or should they just ignore what was happening? So this might be the future of emergency response. You get this kind of reframing going on. So for the authorities' point of view, pushing it back a bit towards organisation is always helpful.
But presumably, it's really helpful if the authorities have an understanding of how communities behave and to an extent are able to predict. Are you able to help them with this process?
Absolutely. Well, at the moment it's very difficult for police, fire, emergency services to engage with behavioural scientists, and we've found really there's no way of doing so. So in practice, authorities, police fall back on their own knowledge or maybe some kind of emergency planning they've done before, or maybe the advice to the Cabinet Office or Emergency Planning College. All of that sort of stuff, I'll say, is very good advice. But what we really need is a real-time tool to enable authorities to predict and act on behaviour. So we've come up with a very short web-based tool. We call it Dr. BAT. It stands for Disaster Response Behavioural Assessment Tool, and it enables police, fire, ambulance to make a prediction as to how communities will behave in a terrorist attack. All that the police have to do is put in details, answer 10 simple questions if something should happen, and it gives them back a response in terms of whether it's that navigation or organisation or the reframing kind of behaviour. So we want to really test this now with police forces. We've got some who are interested in doing this with us to find out how it works in the field.
I was going to say, has it been tested under fire yet?
Okay, well, we've got a lot of interest from police services, and not to name them on this video, but we are working with some at the moment, maybe they don't want to be named at the moment, in terms of responses to incidents. Now, that might not be terrorist attacks, that might be natural disasters at first, things like flooding, but eventually we hope that police will have the confidence to use it in the field for the major events and situations. So let's see how that goes.
And if people want to find out more about Dr. Bat, where do they go?
Okay, well, they go to my website, or they can go to drbat.net, and that will produce the tool for them, and they can start to use it themselves. And it's got my contact details at the end. It's freely available. We provide training and help for it. It's part of an ESRC project. The Economic and Social Research Council have funded this initiative, and we hope it'll be useful to police, emergency services, wherever they are.
John Preston, thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.